Ready? Okay, I'll call to order the June 17th, 2025 Communications Committee meeting. Roll call, please.
Okay. Chairman Gould.
Here.
Alderman Plufka.
Here.
Carrie Waggy. Lois Truman. Absent. Craig Pennington. Rod Wright. Here.
And just
Okay.
as a reminder to everybody new to the committee, if you just make sure your microphone's on, especially when you're going to talk, just push that button to make sure that that comes through in the live stream and everybody can hear you. So first up on the agenda is agenda approval. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the agenda and any issues with it that you can see? If not, I'll assume we can approve that by acclamation. Report of the committee chairs, item C, committee chair and members. Again, welcome Rod and new members that have been recently appointed. Really excited for you all to be part of this because this is definitely the one committee that is mostly focused on communication efforts for our citizens and businesses and communities. So it's important that you're part of this, so I thank you for serving. Alderman Plufka, any report?
No, I have no report.
Okay. Carrie Weggie? Any report? No report? Let's see, Lois is gone. Craig, any report? And our newest member, Rod, any report? Just catching up. That sounds great. Item D is the city administrator report. There is no items there. Is that correct? Okay. And item E is the department report. So we have the social media analytics. Is that correct?
Yes. So you should all be able to see the breakdown of the charts that I will include every month, just kind of giving you a visual of where our social media is at, as well as a PowerPoint presentation, just kind of outlining some of the statistics. And then just some of the takeaways that we're seeing this month. Our monthly numbers grew considerably over the past 30 days, and that's to be expected. We had a major weather event right at a month ago, and there was a lot of public notification that needed to occur via social media because of that storm, and so we utilized social media for that really extensively. And so, you know, we saw a lot of engagement with those posts and that information. So that really gave us an uptick in what we're seeing in terms of our numbers on social media. We saw numbers kind of level out after the uptick from the storm, but as we're getting into the summer, I anticipate that we'll continue to see some good growth because people are out and about doing things, and they, you know, our content is much more readily available. I think over the summer, I'd like to kind of shake up our normal social media processes a bit, and by that I mean I want to start incorporating more videos. And so you'll see that I've included some different video ideas that I'm sort of working through in my head. One of the ones that I'm really excited about is a 60 Seconds with City Staff series. It just would give the public opportunity to get to know the people that are working behind the scenes in the city of Brentwood. What are they doing? You know, it'll help them learn a little bit more about what Public Works does, what the Parks Department does, what the Finance Department does. So I think that that would be those videos would be fairly easy to produce, not too long, and just easy to see if that kind of thing garners support. Also something like safety tips from the police department or the fire department. People are outside doing doing sports, swimming. You know, there's extreme heat that you see in the summer, so I think there's a really good opportunity to kind of produce, again, short form videos that are easily posted to social media and give people some useful information. One thing that I have to work out, but I think is a fun idea, would be a Brentwood Trivia Tuesday. We've got a long history. I think there could be some really fun and interesting facts to share there with our residents, stuff that they wouldn't know.
You'd be surprised. There's probably residents
Well,
that would.
and I think that also gives us a really great opportunity to increase our engagement by not just immediately giving them the answers, but letting people guess in the comments. and then sharing the answer the following day. So I'm going to start building up kind of a list of trivia questions. So if there are any suggestions on things that we could ask as Brentwood residents, please share them with me. And then kind of along the same lines as safety tips, just seasonal tips for summer, for winter, as as the seasons change, figuring out different ways to highlight that type of advice using video. One thing that we talked about last month was increased collaboration. We talked about specifically with the school district and sharing their messaging via our social media outlets to increase the audience outside of the families that are already involved in the school, so that residents know what's going on at the school. One way that we have done that already was sharing the pickup and drop-off patterns so that people are aware of kind of the times that it's going to be busy in the neighborhoods because it's pickup and drop-offs time. So we're looking forward to doing that again as the school year approaches, and just hoping that that cross-posting will help be mutually beneficial for both us and the school district. And the same goes for, cross-posting things from Parks and Rec. As summer is their time. This is when the parks shine, and they have tons of content. So we're just going to share that so that we're reaching our audience as well. And then one thing that was suggested last month was a weekly meeting calendar as opposed to posting each individual meeting. So we are on our second week of trying that. So far, it seems to be going well. And so we'll continue to monitor that to see how that kind of shakes out. Last week, we kind of spoke about the website, and there were some questions about if we could get some statistics on what we're looking at in terms of website usage. So I was able to kind of pull some statistics. Our most visited pages on the city website are, from top to bottom, Brentwood Park, the homepage, skating sessions, the ice rink, the search bar, Parks and Rec, and the volleyball page. So Parks and Rec is leading the charge on where people want to get their information on our website. Over the last 90 days, our website had 48,000 active users. That was up 6.2% over the last 90 days.
Wow.
The countries that our page visitors live in, the top 4 were the US, Canada, India, and Singapore. So
They're scraping.
some of that's a little interesting, but I know. And how visitors are finding our page. The top way that they're finding our page is an organic search, which was actually a new phrase for me. So I wrote down the definition so that I could share it with you. An organic search is an unpaid search result that appears on a search engine results page, so Google. The second most popular way they're finding us is a direct search, where they're typing Brentwood Mo into the search bar and finding us directly. And then you have referral, which means that they're clicking on our website's link through another website, and then social media. So they're visiting our website based from a link on our social media. So that's all I've got for you on that. Are there any questions?
So, I mean, I think some of the changes that you made since the last meeting, I think are good. The only thing I would comment on, this eventually gets into brand guidelines and all of that. The weekly posts, if you look at it from a scannability standpoint, the
font.
The font and the fact that the blocks that stand out the most are the white blocks with the black type, and those are the ones that have empty days that aren't. So as you're scanning,
Yes.
My eye hits Friday and Tuesday that have no meetings. So maybe think about the accessibility and the fact
Absolutely.
that letting those things really jump off the page and.
And we're trying that out. So making
I think
changes
that's
to
great.
it. Absolutely.
Right. Wonderful. I have one comment that's unrelated to social media, so I'm going to hold that until anybody else on the committee have any comments on activity, website or social. Go ahead.
So is the goal with with the engagement, is the goal here to eventually get to the point where there's a more sustainable, consistent audience all the time? Because what I noticed about a couple of the patterns was that, as you already pointed out, that when there's a newsworthy event, everything spikes, which I understand, and that makes a lot of sense. Is the goal here in all the things that you were talking about in terms of a trivia contest and other things, is that to sort of raise the overall so that the waves aren't quite so dramatic from down to 0 up to, on the scales 14 and above,
Right.
during certain moments in time?
My goal, especially with social media, is consistent growth. You don't want to remain stagnant. You want to continue looking at how trends are forecasting and, fitting into those trends. We've consistently seen pretty low engagement on our posts. And so that's a goal that I've set for myself and for the department, is to increase that engagement, because I think that then lends itself to further engagement from residents as a whole.
How is engagement defined?
Engagement is defined as when someone clicks, when someone comments, when someone likes, when someone comments, when someone shares your direct post.
If they just click in and look at it, that's not engagement.
No, that's an impression.
Okay. So
I just
And
don't
some of the things we talked about last meeting is that, the challenge is that we have a lot of times our content, and the good things, we have a significant increase of content since Michelle's been part of it. Our content a lot of times gets shared to the community page and gets a ton of engagement, but we don't ever see any of that engagement. So, trying to get people more comfortable to comment on our posts on our organic sites, and I've seen some people ask questions and then, you've responded. So that's good, because it keeps the conversation where we are part of that.
The observation I wanted to make was, it seems to me that in the time that you've been working on this, what I've seen as being the most dramatic increase has been, it seems like people are more understanding of, there's a weather event, I'm going to go to, one of these sites. There's, there's some issue about an upcoming social event. I'm going to go to those sites to learn about it and to, so there's that. So it seems like that the peaks seem to be getting higher. So at times, right? And then, so I guess, I don't know psychologically how you get folks to think about the websites in a slightly different way, in the sense of waking up in the morning and saying, let's see what's going on. Not for any particular purpose, but
Right.
just to see.
I think I want to make our day-to-day posts more interesting,
Okay.
so that they're not going to ever, those, when we have a big storm, when we have a big event, those posts are always going to see more traffic. But I don't ever want our social media accounts to become stagnant. And that's generally what I'm working for. It's continuous growth in terms of, what I'm learning when it comes to trend forecasting with social media, trying to adapt that to fit our audience. But I never want our social medias to get stagnant. I always want to be considering, what can we be doing to continue to grow.
Yeah, I think that's where we can be expressive as a city and as a brand, whereas the website is where people should go for efficient information.
And we will always, when applicable, redirect to the website, because you're not going to put an entire web page worth of content on
Right.
a social media post.
Any other comments on the analytics that you're seeing? And I did have one question, and it's related to the fact that I saw a recent post from Gene Dell that they are no longer having a local newspaper. How does that impact?
Bring that to the next meeting.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
What do you mean?
I do have a question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I do have a question. I read through all the material today that Bola had sent me, and there was concern about how many links there are in the front door. And I know my bias is that less and way less is more on the front door. And websites that I like sometimes have no more than a couple of links on the front door. You gotta get into it when it, so I don't know if you're working on that or the progress, but to me, the front door is all about image and getting into the site easily and finding stuff because people are going there for information. So that's my stupid question.
That's not a stupid question,
No.
and I think it's a good question. It's one we actually, when this committee first started, restarted, I guess, we talked a lot about fixing the website and making it easier, but then we said, well, we need a foundational understanding, and so we decided to do a strategic audit of our communications and put together a communications plan as a whole, then look at the branding of the city, and then probably the next step would be, how do we sort of reevaluate the website, because that's another fairly large undertaking.
But my limited experience is that communications director makes a nice, clean front door. And then over the years, all the departments are wanting to have something featured on the front door. And so before long, it gets out of control and you've got like 30 links on the front page rather than keeping it nice and clean.
The NASCAR page.
That's been my experience, is that people fight for the real estate in the city.
Yeah, cleaning up the website, limiting the links is kind of a constant, ongoing effort. As something comes up, I will go in and adjust when possible. But we've got a lot of important information to share in Brentwood, and so that, they all cover different topics, so they garnered their own web pages. We want to make sure the information's there, just figuring out.
So we have the budget process coming up.
Yep, that's true.
And I think there's time for this committee to continue the discussion about the redesign of the website and whether we need to budget some money so that Michelle can undertake that next year. So
that's a
that
good
is
point.
also an item that we'll be bringing back to this committee.
Yeah, sounds good. Perfect timing, huh? Okay, and unless there's any other comments, we'll move on to the consent agenda, and I think Craig might be the only member that was here at the last meeting, so I guess if nobody has any issues with the meeting minutes, I can get those approved by acclamation, right? Okay. No issues, Craig? Okay, now we'll approve those by acclamation. So we'll move on to old business. Item G, item G1 is the communications plan and the city logo concept presentation.
So we have Matt Wittern here with Raftelis, who is the company that we have contracted with for the communications audit, communications plan process, and then the logo and style guide development. So he has a presentation for us.
In committee,
Yep, hopefully that's on.
1, 2, 1, 2.
It's on. It's ready to go, I think.
Question is, do my slides work like they did 20 minutes ago with ClickShare? So we'll see.
They're up, yep. And I assume we'll just let you run through the presentation, and then we'll follow up with questions, or if there's any spots that you'd like us to
I
interject.
defer to you, Chairman, however you'd like to run
I'll
it.
let you roll, and if I decide that we should pause, then
Okay.
I'll give you a heads up.
Maybe we can split the difference. Since I'm going to be speaking about the strategic communications plan and also some logo concepts we put together, maybe
Okay.
that's in between those is a great place to pause and have a discussion.
Sounds great, thank
Okay.
you.
Oh, good evening, members of the committee. I thought I'd start off a little bit just by introducing the company that I've worked for the past 6 years. So who is Raftelis? We say that we are the country's most trusted management consulting practice that helps local governments thrive by providing expert advice so they can deliver better results for their residents, which I think is probably the reason why every one of you serve on the panel today, wanting to make the lives of the good people of Brentwood a better place. We have provided financial and organizational assistance for more than 1,700 public agencies and utilities that serve more than a quarter of the United States population, including agencies serving 38 of 50 of the nation's largest 50 cities. A little bit about myself. I'm actually pinch hitting tonight for my colleague Samantha Villegas, who was the project manager on this. She had a family commitment that she couldn't get out of, so she sent me in her place. Samantha is one of the all-time greats when it comes to public relations professionals. She is accredited in public relations by the Public Relations Society of America, as am I. But of course, she's also really competitive, and so she decided to take it up to the next level and join the PRSA College of Fellows, which is something that I haven't achieved quite yet. So I have about 25 years of experience in the world of public relations. In addition to having my APR, I'm a project management professional from Project Management Institute. My specialty is really helping organizations and entities, local governments, take really complicated subjects and make them more simple for their residents and stakeholders to understand.
Matt, just one
Yeah.
you might want to switch. We're seeing your presenter slides. You
yeah.
might want to switch to.
That is, how did I tackle that earlier? This is what I mentioned about ClickShare. So there's this thing, then you'd go here, and you go here.
Full screen, hopefully. There we go.
Thank you, sir. So I wanted to just review our project scope and deliverables that we performed on behalf of the city with help of city staff. The goal here was to fully assess the city's communications efforts and brand and develop a strategic communications plan and logo. Our tasks involved conducting a situation analysis and stakeholder mapping exercise. We conducted one-on-one key stakeholder interviews. We performed a benchmarking analysis that I'll talk about a little bit later with similarly sized communities, both one here in Missouri and also another one on the East Coast. We performed a communications and brand audit and developed a strategic communications plan and also an accompanying social media plan. I'm here tonight to talk about logo and brand style guidelines that are the next deliverable due once we get the blessing, hopefully get the blessing of the committee. We've provided a series of deliverables, but I think the most important one is the draft final brand and style guide that will accompany the strategic communications plan. So let's talk about the communications assessment. Our assessment process typically takes about 4 steps. The first step is engaging, and that is where we work with city staff to develop a thorough understanding. We had a kickoff meeting with a lot of internal stakeholders at the table, and we really dug deeply to try to understand what's the current situation here at the city, what's the history that has brought us here, and what's the vision for how you want to perform for the people of Brentwood in the future. Our next step was assessing the key practices and activities within a department and identified opportunities that later presented themselves in the strategic communications plan. We then took a benchmarking look and said, what are similarly sized communities, both locally and on a national basis? What are they doing in the field of communications? What kind of communication staff do they have? What are their common practices? What are the practices that are uncommon that are being successful, et cetera? So we compared kind of how to look over the back fence to see what the neighbors were doing. Finally, we work to make recommendations for enhancing the communications approach. So this is where I get to brag on city staff a little bit, because many of our clients where we do services like these, we come in and it is an effort to get to a place where we feel like they're doing a good job. Time and time again, when we looked at what the Brentwood staff were doing with the amount of resources that they have and the quality of work that they're putting out is incredible. So it's taking what is a really good program and just saying, what's the next step to try to make it great? That's what we did in the strategic communications plan. I said, here's what you're doing, which is great, and here are some best practices and some ideas to really make it better. So what did we hear in the kickoff workshop from leadership and stakeholders? So this was in addition to interviews we conducted with 10 stakeholders with a diverse range of perspectives. The first is that communications is a really core part of staff culture here, that it really enhances collaboration and coordination. The city, you guys have a really excellent reputation as a great community. It's a desirable place to live, work, and play. In the few hours that I had before the meeting today, I was able to drive around Brentwood, and it's obvious that that is the case, and that your communications professionals at the city are doing a great job really making sure you're living up to that value. There does seem to be a little bit of a lack of consensus on what needs to be communicated. And so I know for this committee, that's an important question, is with the limited resources we have, what are the highest priorities that we need to communicate? So the what and the how is kind of a challenge. And so we provided Melissa with some best practices in the plan to help her overcome that challenge. Last is just the demographic shift that's going on. So changes to the makeup of the community. It sounds like you have younger residents moving in, some more families moving in, and newer residents. So how do you address those? How do you engage them? How do you make sure they're welcomed into the community and feel like a part of the community from the first day? So let's talk a little bit about benchmarks. The city of Des Peres and Bath, Maine were the ones that we selected to compare against. So your communication staff levels are on par. So when we select these communities, we try to look for similarities when it comes to level of staffing, what's their population, that sort of thing. My wife happens to be the communications director at the city of Centennial, where I live, just south of Denver. And so I always think, okay, Centennial has 108,000 people. Allison has 5 people in her team, and then comparing that to one-person shops like Brentwood is looking at it and going, "Oh, honey, you got to get your people in gear." Like, Melissa's making it look bad. Michelle, sorry, Michelle. So your staffing levels are on par. Bath has 1 FTE, and Des Peres relies on the assistant city manager to do kind of a dual-hatted role. Des Peres has about a $40,000 to $50,000 communications budget, with Bath at $91,000. So the budget's larger. Both the cities we compare to rely on staff teams and consultants for city communications. So what does that mean? There are things that come up that they look to outside resources to help them with. So they have an on-call consultant, communications consultant, to help with specific projects. And there's similar channels used across the board with similar challenges that are being faced, and consistency across all localities. So we also had a look at the communications materials that have been put together that are public-facing materials. We looked for consistency in design and messaging, other factors as well. So we found that there was a really good use of multiple channels that are really in line with benchmarks, and that we think that they are meeting the community's needs. It sounds like the committee also has some desires to say, let's take our website from good to great, and have some strategy behind that. That is something that is recognized in the communications plan as saying, you might want to look at that. There are really good design practices in place, and we recommend having a style guide that is part of our deliverables to say, here's how the city of Brentwood does it. Here's the fonts, here's the colors, here's the ways that you can use our logo, here's how you can't use our logo, just to bring everything into consistent form, okay? And it'll be easy to follow, and the idea is that it's something that everybody in the city who has a role of putting a memo together has a template that they can start with, right? So it's easy implementation on the city side as well. We've found that there's opportunities to enhance language accessibility. So what does this mean? We recommend that when, as PR professionals, we try to write at an 8th grade reading level. The reading level that we found at the city, most is beyond 8th grade. So we recommended that an effort be made to increase the accessibility by making the accessibility a little bit easier on the reading. And then there's some chances, it sounds like you guys had a good discussion earlier about the social media report. So there's opportunities and strategies and tactics that we recommend to enhance the effectiveness of that digital media. So here's where we say, you might consider a more streamlined web nav, and increased intention on social media will really enhance success there. So ultimately, we had 3 recommendations that came out of this process. The first is to focus on brand guidelines and communication standards to standardize everything within the city so that you are presenting a united front looking out into serving your community. Mr. Chairman, I know that you have been involved in branding practices and you understand the importances of that presentation and how meaningful that is to audiences. So doing that will really help build consistency and recognition and also increase efficiency. We also think that there might be an opportunity to do a targeted approach to reach and engage all. I mentioned earlier a specific audience, that people who are new to the community. There are others, but having a more targeted approach is going to help the city reach and engage these members more equitably and more effectively. And the last is just some minor adjustments to digital media. So small but effective changes are going to enhance the understanding and engagement across all of the city's digital platforms. So let's talk a little bit. That was our communications audit. That was our findings of what is currently in place. So let's talk a little bit about the communications plan that we put together. I think that'll be, if it hasn't been already provided to the committee, it's something that's part of your packet. So what are best practices when it comes to creating an effective strategic communications plan? So I follow what is the PRSA, Public Relations Society of America, calls the RPI system, which is a 4-step plan. You do some research, you plan, you implement, and then you evaluate. And in your evaluation, that serves as research for the next time that you're going to be putting together a plan. So I know that Michelle's going to have a lot of mini plans being put together. And so we provided her with the tools that she needs to follow that 4-step plan. So starting with research, we conducted some stakeholder mapping. We understand that's a real effective way to say we don't have all the resources in the world. Who are the most impacted and interested stakeholders on a particular issue, and how do we make sure that we're communicating with them effectively? We also share how to do an issues and materials and process analysis on each one of these to make sure that you're providing the right level and types of communication, meeting people where they are. So next is a planning process. So we looked at internal processes and then put together a series of best practices that we've gathered from cities and counties and local governments around the country and put together. All of those are in the plan that is ahead of you. So next is implementation. So you get the right people involved in it. You bring people into the process. You bring them in and you give them the resources that they need to communicate effectively. And finally, then there's the evaluation piece. Always looking, I know I was grateful to see that you guys started off with social media metrics. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so knowing that this committee is focused on that, I know that you're going to be focusing on the evaluation piece that comes through on the individual mini plans. And we're going to have qualitative and quantitative metrics to see how successful those programs were. And the lessons that are learned there can then be applied to the next strategic plan. So the overarching goals for the plan provide really a framework for city communications staff and leadership. We want to increase efficiency internally and externally to do the most with the resources that you have. We're putting together consistent messaging and quality engagement with the community. We want the community to have a greater understanding of the channels and how to get information that they are seeking. So this goes to the question about the website. How can you be 2 or 3 clicks away for any piece of information that somebody wants when they come in the front door, right? We think we can drive increased community participation in city events. And we think we can find support from constituents on social media, getting them to engage and not just interact, or not just view it, but engage with it, share it, comment on it, et cetera, and help with correcting misinformation and sharing information about events. So we also looked at guidance on when to consult the communications manager and when to consider outside consultants. So there are things that Michelle is going to be able to handle on her own, and there are things that we are recommending. When it comes to this, you should have an on-call consultant or a stable of consultants on the outside who you can call upon. So what are some things that we think are being handled and should be handled internally? I think we're giving some guidance on, how significant is this particular thing that we're trying to communicate about? What is it a sensitive issue? Then is there a need to bring in social media, or is there a desire, or would that be an advantage to bring in social media? How much collaboration do we need, especially I think from like an internal communications perspective with the department directors and others across the organization? Is there a need or a desire, or should we, as best practices, get community input? So when to consider contract communication services. So for crisis and risk communications and planning, media training, might want to call in an outside graphic designer, video production and still photography. Your website redevelopment project is not something that we would recommend handling it 100% internally, or if you might be considering developing a mobile app. And finally, meeting facilitation. If you're trying to get people in a room to really connect, often wearing two hats as a city staffer and a facilitator is not a great idea. So we also offered guidance on developing and implementing major parts of external communications. Guidance on developing a strategic communications plan, how to conduct outreach and develop materials, using and managing social media, some recommendations on the website, and planning and conducting community engagement. So those are all things that when you dig into the strategic communications plan, you'll find, and I just wanted to highlight them for you this evening. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
And just as a clarification, I'm seeing an audit review PowerPoint. I'm seeing a summary report. Is there a document that is the final communications plan?
Yes, and it should have also come to you guys via email as well.
Okay. And I'm also seeing the plan. So is it the plan and the logo? So that's what you just took us through, is the plan and logo concept. So is this document the plan, or is there a separate document that's a
separate document? There is a separate document that
That is the brand and logo concept. This is just this communications plan.
and the draft plan, what I believed was in here, and I'm sorry about that, but was also sent to you via email
Okay.
yesterday.
Okay, so I haven't had a chance, and as I was looking at board docs, I think, what I have is the
Are you not
the
finding it?
the February strategic communications assessment, which is basically what gives the high points that he's provided here. And then I'm not sure I've read through the. Okay, yeah. I mean, I think it's, I
I think we have it here. Strategic communications.
no, that's just the assessment that was done in February that then
Yeah, that's right.
informs the final
Yeah,
plan.
no, that's right. You're
There
right.
was a final plan. I mean, I think, eventually we'll need to probably motion to adopt the plan, correct? So I think we just want to make sure that the committee has access to the full
We'll get that to you.
strategic plan, so that not just the summary and the assessment, but the full plan, so we can
We'll
kind
send
of
everything to you.
read through it. I don't know, did you receive it, or have you received it and read through it? the full plan?
I looked through it today and before there's any formal adoption, I would strongly recommend that there be a crisis communications portion of that plan. God forbid that it ever has to be used, but I read somewhere there was a little bit of a problem of kind of multiple spokespeople for the city and sometimes not knowing kind of who was addressing an issue. But if a crisis occurs, that needs to be on paper and it needs to be understood by everybody and it needs to be implemented. And the last time in the world you can do it is after the crisis occurs. If the storm damage had moved a mile or two, Brentwood would have been in that situation. And I would, again, strongly urge you to get that on paper and have the protocol in place. And then the breakdown of when to bring in outside help, that's probably a good time to bring in outside help too,
Thank you
for
for
a sense
saying
of
that.
perspective. Because it's awfully hard to do when you're in the fishbowl,
Actually,
to do good crisis
I think it's
communication.
unfortunate that we have lived through that a couple of times and have had to rely on outside consultants to
Right.
help the city with crisis communication. But it might not be formally on paper, but I think the good thing is we
Mm-hmm.
have enough employees who have been here a long time. So when these things happen, we just go into reaction mode and know who's
Right,
speaking.
right.
If it's a public safety issue, it's the police chief or the fire chief. And if it's other things that are outside of that scope, then it's the city administrator.
Right,
So
right.
we have that down.
Yeah. Well, I would make it part of that overall plan, and then I would make sure everybody in the city reads it and understands it.
So why it's not included in here? It's at a cost. And so this committee, we brought this
take that
to
up.
you, and the decision was made on what we would have Raftelis work on. So that is a budgeting discussion
So maybe
for
that's another,
fiscal
yeah.
'26.
Right, so we could, as an addendum to whatever adopted plan we have, that might be something to evolve the document. Because as you noted, the plans aren't final and done and put it on a shelf and that's it, right?
Never final.
It should be an ever-evolving, living and breathing document. You did email it, Kelly, so my apologies. It wasn't in board docs, so
When was it emailed?
yesterday. So my apologies, I have not read through that in detail. I thought that was coming to us, or I thought it was also in board docs, sorry. So I think, we'll need to maybe spend a little bit more time with that, and maybe have, if the rest of the committee has read it and has questions over it tonight, that's great. You're welcome to speak up and ask more questions about it. If not, I would recommend that you spend some time and then maybe email Kelly or Michelle or Bola
Right.
and with any
So
questions.
it's not my expectation, and I hope it's not yours either, that you would be adopting this tonight, because you're just hearing about
No,
it the first
no,
time.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable approving a motion to adopt it at this point. Any other feedback or questions? I mean, it seems, as a glance at this, it seems to me to be a very thorough plan and structure, so I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. Any other questions on the strategic plan, communications plan, before we move on? Nope, okay. So let's continue on presentation.
Great. Let's spend a little time talking about a redesign, a reimagining of a logo to represent the city of Brentwood. So to walk you through the process for logo development, and again, I differentiate the process for logo development from the process for brand identity development. Brand identity development is a much, as you know, Chairman, a much more in-depth and much more resource intensive, and there's a higher cost associated with a major rebranding project. So what our charge here was to say, what can we do for the budget that has been, the people of Brentwood have said we wanted to dedicate to this. What kind of progress can we make on this through a multi-step iterative process, working with staff to get to something that we think is a nice, updated, fresh logo that I think represents the city pretty well. So I'm going to walk you through every one of these concepts and share with you kind of here's how we got to this one. Here was the comments made on this one that created this evolution to this next version. And then I'll just kind of walk you through the process and look for feedback on that. So back in January, we hosted a branding workshop with staff. That was part of our again, kind of our research phase. Every community is different. Brentwood is unique in its own right. So we wanted to learn as much as we could about the community. So we sat with the staff. We conducted, I think, 10 one-on-one interviews with stakeholders, really asking the question about what is it like to live in Brentwood? How do you feel about that? How does, where are you today, and where do you envision the community, 5-10 years into the future? That gave us a lot of information. We went back to the lab, so to speak, and in February through May, I'm sorry, David, my colleague, David George, is the creative director for this project from Raftellus. He too couldn't make it tonight, but he's participating over the Zoom call. So I know, David,
He's up there.
do you want to just unmute and say hello, sir? Sorry, sir.
Yeah, no worries. Hello, everyone. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm the creative director at Raftellus, and we've really enjoyed working with the city on this project. I really like the design work that we've come up with, and I'm looking forward to kind of talking it through with you all tonight.
Thank you. We're always, when David's in person, he's great. When the audio doesn't work and it's on a Zoom call, it's not great. So we've elected to let me be the one to deliver these slides tonight. But David, I certainly, as we discussed earlier, encourage you to chime in at any moment to add some color or some detail as being a kind of a key member of the process.
Sounds good.
So February through May, we created logo designs and worked through those with staff. Here in June, we have some revision designs and we're presenting them to the committee. And then we feel in June and July is the timing to develop the to finalize the logo, and then particularly the brand and style guide that, again, that's the how-to manual. That's how you give that to staff in the city of how they can properly use the logo so there's consistency across the boards. So that was kind of the timeline for this. A logo development project this was pretty fast run through the paces here, but I think we got a pretty good result. So in the branding workshop, the question is, what input did we get from the staff? So we said, really, what's your vision? Their vision was that the city of warmth it's true, and it's something that they want to be realized. That you're a city of tradition and modernization, so there's this nice mix there. We heard that y'all are fun, so that was great news to hear. We heard that you are kind of at the center of the things and at the urban center, yet your neighborhoods are quaint and traditional. And there was a nod to the changing demographics. Again, those newcomers, helping them be welcomed and part of the community. So describe Brentwood. We got some great answers here. Bustling, welcoming and convenient, a central hub, a small, tight-knit community, traditional, entertaining, and sustainable. What's Brentwood's personality? We heard that you're traditional and mature, outgoing and positive, community-focused, the city's service-oriented, engaging and fun, and progressive. Quick reaction from the panel. Agree, disagree? Feel about right?
I think I would agree with a lot of what's said, and you know, the thing that I always kind of hone in on is the fact that Brentwood is the sort of epicenter of St. Louis County, if you will, but yet we still have this almost Mayberry, small town, close-knit kind of vibe to it. So it's very unique as a place.
There's certainly for like community, we do larger branding projects, but for community logo projects, it's always a balance. It's always finding that right balance, and you're trying to kind of achieve multiple things at the same time. And of course, it's a creative process, so it's going to be very subjective, and it's going to be it's going to be based on where your heart is, how you view things when you see things that are graphic, right? So I feel like the Family Feud here doing the revealing of on this Likert scale where staff came down on saying how Brentwood currently is perceived. So on the Likert scale between traditional and progressive, way more traditional. See some, at least no shaking heads on that yet so far. How about between serious and fun and playful? There's a right in the middle. Understated to bold.
I think that speaks to the balance that the chairman was talking about too. We're bordered on, and we're run through the middle of our city by major thoroughfares on all borders and through the middle of the town, and yet you can be a block from any of those streets and you find yourself in a
Totally different world. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
Concur. Between understated and bold, any guesses? Right in the middle. How about, this is going to be easy, urban or natural?
More urban, I would say.
1.54 was the average, David? No, I'm kidding. Steady and stable or dynamic? Steady and stable.
Yeah, I think the fourth line is another conundrum with Brentwood, which is a good thing, right? We are more urban as our location and somewhat density, but we've done such a great job of elevating the natural resources that we have in such a small town that we have a lot of natural amenities and
beautiful,
assets.
yeah.
So, and the fact that there's a watershed, I mean, major watershed that borders our town, it just creates a lot of wildlife opportunity and everything. So it's interesting. Hard one to answer, actually.
I would be fishing that a lot.
Yeah. MSD wouldn't want you to. But.
So showing your current logo, top right here, we got some input from the staff and said, what are your impressions of the current logo? What do you like? Well, keeping anonymity, nothing was one answer. The trees, which I can see why. They like the representation of things that your community entails, which I really see all along the top there with homes and businesses, and that speaks to with the trees in the park, and it speaks to that to me. There's another advantage is that it's known. It's been in use for so many years that it's really recognizable. Okay, easy to recognize. What changes would you like to see? Well, like some more versatility and scalability. Little tired of the color. Thought maybe it could use a more modern update. There's a lot going on in your current logo. The artist who carved that block above you, Mr. Chairman, if they didn't use a CNC, that took a long time.
Predates CNCs.
Pretty intricate. So looking for something that's a little more simplified, and something that reflects who you want to be. Okay, so important. There's ambition in how a city's logo performs. We asked what elements are important. Businesses in shopping and residents and trees I mentioned. There's a certain warmth and safety and community in the current logo. We heard that the impressions from staff of, we're preparing for the future. They're kind of a more urban feel. And I think one of the most important elements is, each one of your departments would love to have Public Works underneath the logo so they could have their own letterhead, but still fits under the brand umbrella. So how can we do something that allows that flexibility? So I'll walk you through we went through, I think, 3 different iterations of logo concepts. So look at here, option A, we were able to get in, I believe that the 4, let's call it petals of the flower, are supposed to represent the wards in the community. City of Warmth fit underneath pretty nicely. We anticipate that there could be cause for you to use this logo on materials that are for outside audiences, okay? Especially maybe even some that are outside the state. So early on, we thought it's probably going to be important to be able to have Missouri underneath it for people who are far and wide. And this was a simple kind of a logo bug that can be used, not as a primary thing, but as a little bit of an accent used in places. Option B is a little more blocky. We used the City of Warmth here. So this logo option really emphasizes the text with a modern but friendly typeface. It aligns with the characteristics of the community and the tagline. It included a simplified representation of the state of Missouri, shaped with the MO abbreviation. So this stacked version provides an option that is more vertical in orientation to use when the long horizontal version might not work as well. And the graphic element takes the simplified Missouri shape and adds the B to represent Brentwood. Only intended for use when it's already understood to be a Brentwood piece. So, not substitute for the whole logo, but to augment, like on a second page of an annual report or something like that. Option C here, this logo literally and artistically captures some of the features of the city, the mix of residential homes and businesses with tree-lined streets and parks. The B letter form shape makes a distinctive and identifiable logo mark for the city. The type is a modern font with rounded corners to make it feel current but still inviting. And the W letter form has an overlap in the middle as a nod to the existing logo. The second line in the logo can be City of Warmth for more local use, but again, we're allowing, we thought we'd include the state, Missouri, for outside of those boundaries. These were all 3 of them, again, together. This was the first round of logo concepts. Here's what we heard on option A. There was criticism that the accompanying icon really reminded people of a hospital or medical center logo. And city staff looked at it and said, okay, we can see representing the 4 wards present there, but are people outside the city going to make that connection at all? That seemed, in retrospect, a little more city-centric look at the logo. And there weren't a whole lot of fans of the lowercase, but we're looking at capitalizing the B or even the entire word. So option C, they appreciated the way David's team was able to work in various aspects, but just weren't really big fans of it, and overall it wasn't a favorite. So what was selected to move forward in the process was this one. They liked the state icon because there are multiple Brentwoods in the U.S. The comment was maybe we could make the state icon more accurate and actually show the state borders, and thought to eliminate the split word logo option. So at the end of April, we presented revisions to this option based on the feedback we received. You can see we refined the state border option and made a more true-to-life representation of that state outline. We also presented a variation with a more condensed font to help with the length of the logo, as well as better define the state logo there, or the state icon. And city staff generally liked this revision of it. So let's see. So from the prior version, we thought it would be worthwhile to explore a couple of variations that added elements to make the icon more unique and recognizable. So we came up with two versions. One incorporated a leaf to represent the trees and natural beauty in here. The second incorporated sun rays to represent the city of warmth. It also helped with the work in the tagline and gave the logo a brighter, fun feel. And then ultimately, I think we agreed that we preferred the sun rays version and included that one here. This is a look at the bugs there. So these really come to life when we start talking about colors. And that was an important thing to, as part of the update, to bring more color, more variety, to modernize things. So for this color palette, we wanted to pay homage to the existing branding that people were accustomed to seeing. So this, you remember that's kind of a major green there, but modernizing the color palette. So first one here is a teal color. We did some research in the surrounding agencies in your area and making sure that we're going to be unique. I know there's some major employers here that also have some of these common colors. So these would be the colors that we recommend that try to find the balance between new and old, city and urban, family, community, business.
I just want to let you know, just for reference, they are showing up a little bit different on that screen than
Sure.
in
Yeah.
actuality.
It always, yeah, that absolutely is the case, so,
So don't trust your eyes.
right. Don't trust that screen.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you can trust this screen either, but, you know.
So here are some examples of how that they can be worked in here using the two colors. Here's with the sunburst available. In City of Warmth and sun rays, they just kind of go together in my mind. So then we said, well, this is pretty abstract still. How do these get put into use? And so we mocked up a few examples of how they might be shown up on city vehicles, on letterhead, on signage, on activewear. This is introducing that sunburst block to it as well. So what we are asking for the committee is for feedback on the logo. Do you feel like we went in the right direction, wrong direction, okay direction? I'm going to leave this slide up here so you can kind of see. I'm happy to go to any other slides. But given the research that we did and the people that we talked to and the iterations that we went through, this was the resulting product, and we hope you guys like it. Love to entertain comments, questions, anything.
Up to committee to, Rod, go ahead.
I looked at those today, and you, on the version B you had, there was a block version that had Brentwood on different lines. And I know for some social media sites, a more blocked logo is really handy rather than something that is so horizontal, and unfortunately, the name of the city is really long. I was just asking questions about that and your thoughts about that in terms of the kind of the more blocked version versus the really long horizontal one.
Yeah, David, I might put you on the spot and see if you wanted
Yeah,
to take that
it's on
one.
the bottom of the page here. I like that look quite a little bit, but only because it was more of a block, and I thought it might be more usable that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why we did that, after speaking to staff and speaking to Michelle. Um, Having such a long word is a bit of a challenge in some use cases. So that's why we kind of split it up. There were varying opinions on whether kind of it was okay to split up the word like that. Um, and we kind of lean more into the no, but I would say it's still probably up for debate. I think from just a pure design perspective, I think the stacked logo um, is probably more usable, and also I like the way that it looks. But again, then it also comes down to a functional aspect of it, and does it confuse people and make them think it's actually two words and that kind of thing. So a little bit of a conundrum there. So I'm definitely open to feedback if you all have any strong thoughts about that.
I know it's in violation of kind of branding, but are both usable if they?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was kind of the intention. We could have a horizontal one that would be the primary one used,
Uh-huh.
and then you could use that stacked version in instances where you needed something that was less
Like in a
horizontal.
block,
Right.
right?
Had you ever thought about the stacked, but with the more vertical oriented printing? In other words, the one time I see it where you've got it stacked, you've got it in the first font that you showed. I don't know that I've seen it, the Brentwood split up, but with the more vertical.
Yeah, we didn't. The stacked version kind of got rolled out before we moved on to that next round, which is why it's not in there. We could we could easily do that pretty quickly, if that's something that folks wanted to see, explore.
The other comment I had was, had you ever thought about taking that? Oh, I like the overlapping W in option C. Have you thought about trying to apply it to this? To option B?
Yeah, we didn't. We went with a few different typefaces. I would have to kind of dig into it to see with that more condensed font how well it would work. It might be a little too tight in there to make it overlap.
Yeah.
But it's something we could definitely explore. I agree. I do like the overlapping W. I think it looks really good on the version with the city and the B.
Touch of uniqueness that it's,
Yeah.
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 I think some other things that could be explored as far as overlapping is maybe, as we look at the kerning of the word and whether or not the O's somehow overlap, because that's something that's been in the heritage of it, where, as you see back here, the O's kind of intertwine, which is kind of a nice touch. I think overall, that was my thought, is that I felt like, some of these are good explorations using fonts, but they don't really yet feel unique enough to be a brand mark for a city. They kind of feel like they're, I'd like to see some elements or augmentation to the typeface that's used, so that it creates, so that you don't need, you could just use the word Brentwood, and it has a bit of a uniqueness to it or a flair to it that feels like something that we could own. Just as far as my feedback goes, I think, option A, I absolutely appreciate the uniqueness that you brought into it, and so that's one that I could tell that you did alter the face, and you made very deliberate decisions on bringing the cross of the T all the way through, and it does feel more like maybe a healthcare or even a shopping center. In fact, it made me think of the Brentwood Square branding, a little bit more of the 50s style.
Yeah. And that was sort of the play there, kind of the combination of modern and traditional, kind of a little bit of a nod to a throwback with the font. But yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate the push there, but I would agree that that's maybe not the way we want to go.
But I really like the fact that it conveys that notion of being at the center.
Yeah, I think there's something to, I don't think we found an icon yet that I think represents what brings out some of the assets that Brentwood has. I think in the typeface that was used in option B that was selected to move forward, I see how, yes, it's bolder, which I like, especially, one of the bigger problems that we have with the current logo is it's trying to do too much. It's got too much going on, and especially today's digital age. All of the little clip arty things just don't translate. And I think, and then killing some of the clip art and just having the word, there's the balance of it is off. So you've got to, change so that's where we started with this idea of we need a new brand that we can apply everywhere and then actually we feel represents who we are today.
Right.
I'm concerned about I understand your perspective and I appreciate your perspective on the fact that I was wondering why we had so much heaviness on the state of Missouri in the mark. So I get why anybody outside of St. Louis are attracting people to, and there's plenty of other Brentwood, California, that we need to differentiate. So I'm understanding of the use of specifically the word, the acronym MO, or even the word Missouri. I'm not sure about using the state. I think when the state is in there, it starts to feel, I start looking at the elements and where we're placing elements and thinking, okay, if I don't know anything about where this city is, the sun rays that you have there up in the upper, right corner, so I'm going to think, is this a city that's in the northeast corner of the state of Missouri, So I think location of elements then gets really tricky because it's not where Brentwood is. So I'd like to see some explorations that don't rely on the outline of the state. I think your new font here is with the condensed does help with that width issue without having to worry about stacking. If we found the right icon, you could have an icon Brentwood, and then so you could have a center aligned sort of stacking that might work better in vertical formats. Honestly, option C, it was intriguing to me, although I think the stylism of the artwork or the iconography maybe wasn't as practical, in the B. If you get real small with
Embroidery.
it, it might be difficult. But I think that it was interesting that you're bringing in the trees, the taller buildings, the more homes. What's missing again is we've got creeks and watersheds running through here. So I'd love to see something that has a reference to the fact that we have all this water amenity, which some kinds has been a problem, but we've
And
we've
less
gotten
with
it
too
under
much of it.
control in a certain extent. But it is an asset, and it does create a lot of natural beauty that I think is unique to Brentwood. So I'd love to see some a little bit more depth of exploration and trying to pull out some of those unique assets of the city of Brentwood and incorporate them into a mark that we feel we can own. It isn't so kind of generic feeling, but also has a timelessness to it. So obviously the first one doesn't have as much timelessness to it. So David.
What about, so did you ever think about taking the bug from option A and insetting the more vertical B from option B?
I'm not sure I'm following.
So if you take the revised option B, the revised local concepts option B, and take that more vertical B and set that into the shape of the bug in option A. That almost like an oval, but then it's squared off on the one corner. In other words, instead of using the state silhouette, but insetting it with the font of option B, the more vertical version of option B. See what I'm saying? So go down a little bit more because you're not,
Yeah, the next,
yeah.
the one that you evolved it to. But I mean, I think, what I'd like to do is, I don't want to get into
Yeah.
trying to design by
No,
committee.
no, that's fine.
Um,
Yeah, I understand that.
During tonight's meeting, I'd like to provide feedback, and potentially, ask, obviously, what you all would still need from us, in order to get this to a place that we feel, represents the city. One of the things that you had mentioned in your presentation that I actually would have loved to have seen is a bit of a branding audit of some of our competitors. What do, just a logo, some pages of logos of what are some of the surrounding municipalities looking like? And then maybe what are some best practices from around the country that, hey, this one really, stands out nicely because of these reasons. And we take a look at that and say, okay,
What do you like? What
yeah,
don't
what
you
do we
like?
like, what do we don't like?
What do you like
and then,
about that?
And then that way, it gives you some guidance of where to go with it, as opposed to just putting stuff against the wall and hoping it sticks.
No, I'm not sure that we putting up against the wall and hoping something sticks.
No. I'm just saying that,
But to your point, I really liked all the colors. I thought the color scheme was really
I agree.
nice. I assume you all have, looked at towns surrounding us to make sure we're not, duplicating.
Ripping them off.
My only,
Yeah, we did.
okay, my only comment on the sunburst is that it looks a little bit like Walmart. But I think we could remedy that with just not using yellow. So just a thought.
Yeah, I didn't think of that, but now that you said it, I won't be able to forget it.
Yeah, David's ready to change it.
Yeah, I appreciate all the feedback. I think one nice takeaway I have from this meeting, the comment about the water. We struggled a little bit in knowing sort of what elements to incorporate that might be, distinctive and unique to the city. So, we took with the option that had kind of the city illustration within the B.
Yeah,
That was sort of our play on like a modernized version of what you have now that's more usable and kind of condensed and concise. But if there are other elements within the city, me not being a local Brentwood person, if there are other kind of distinctive elements that you think are worthwhile to potentially capture in some next rounds, that's something we would definitely be interested in hearing about.
yeah, and again, I was most intrigued by that B because it felt like, maybe stylistically it's not right. Maybe the line work is too thin, and but there was something interesting there about using the B as a container and using
Right.
metaphorical iconography to sort of bring to life what assets this city brings. So I thought that was interesting. I wouldn't, again, if we weren't going to rely so heavily on the state of Missouri outline, maybe
Frees
there's
us up to do.
something, maybe reevaluate the use of the outline of the B and try to find the right style and the right iconography to bring forth in that. Might be interesting. And again, thinking through, how's it look? Can it look good as a favicon on a website, this big?
Yeah, yeah, and we did play around with, the stroke weights on that one and kind of scaling it. And we landed where, kind of in the middle where we thought it would work.
Yeah,
But it is one of those things.
it's a tough one. Yeah.
Trial and error, yeah. So I guess I'll leave it more up to Michelle and Bola and Sam when she's back in the fold as far as kind of what our next steps are on the logo. But obviously, if you would like to, we're more than happy to continue kind of exploring what else we might be able to do.
Yeah,
correct?
Jeff, the only thing I have to say, and I'm paraphrasing David now, wherever we end up, it needs to be something that can be used on social media sites.
100%.
I would encourage everybody here to go to Facebook, for example, and look at the Brentwood page and see that in the little icon for Brentwood. You can't tell what it is.
Right.
You literally can't tell what it is. And the reason why, I think if you looked at Richmond Heights or Clayton or Webster Groves, you'll find a logo that's a block. And the
Yeah, a
reason
one-to-one-
why
a
is
one-to-one
because
ratio, yeah.
the emphasis on digital communications today, and it works better that way. That's kind of why I ask, could you take B and do it two different ways back when we were having that conversation? Because that one.
I agree with you. It
is
needs
on
to
a
be,
block.
it needs to be versatile and be able to fit within the one-to-one format.
It's going to be around for a long time.
yeah.
You're right.
Craig, any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think, as you can tell, creative is subjective. This one looks like it would be the one that less people disliked. Not people liking the logo. It doesn't really do anything for me personally. It just kind of sits there. It doesn't have any emotion or doesn't have any passion or personality for me. It's like a Microsoft Word type logo in my, and you guys, that's not a knock on your work or anything like that, because I'm sure you spent hours and hours and hours working on this stuff, and it's very difficult to come up with something that everybody's going to fall in love with. But this particular one just doesn't, it's just kind of flat.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this is probably a safer option, maybe. Like you said, kind of pleases everybody.
Well, this
go ahead.
not pleases everybody, but people won't
Yeah.
hate it.
Won't hate it,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I'd
yeah.
rather go with something a little bit more cutting edge, a little bit edgier.
Yeah, and that's that's
progressive.
also the challenge of balancing that kind of traditional perspective with going full on modern. You want to strike that balance, because going back to like what we heard during discussions with staff, we don't want to go full on modern like you would see in,
Right.
New York City
Right.
or whatever.
Right, no, definitely not.
Yeah.
Thank you. You guys, good work though. I mean,
Yeah, it's great.
Thank
So
you.
what would be helpful to you? Would a little bit more refined brief or a mood board of assets that we feel represent the city? What would be helpful in the process?
Yeah, I think what would be helpful, like I said, if there are any distinctive elements within the city, whether it be, a landscape feature, the fact that it's a tight-knit community, whatever it is, anything that's kind of something you can visualize.
Yeah.
Anything like that we could incorporate into kind of the iconography, because it is challenging sometimes if you don't have those as kind of a starting point, then you do end up with, I hate to say more generic, but
Yeah, sure.
yeah. So anything like that would be helpful. And yeah, if you have any, I mean, I think you provided some good feedback tonight, but if you have any, particular things that you strongly like or don't like that weren't already mentioned, feel free to provide those. If you do have logos, that you love, you're welcome to share them. We also want to make what we're doing for you all distinctive and unique.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, I think
but if there's something that's like, I really wish we had something in this kind of feel, this, tone, feel free to share it. For sure.
Okay, sounds good. Carrie, any thoughts? Okay.
That's a good thought, to provide logos that we've seen that we like.
May I ask what comes to your mind when you think about what David just said? Does anything come to your mind in Brentwood that you think would be those features that you would like to see?
I mean, I don't know how permanent it is or how translatable it is, but this building has kind of a unique architecture to it in terms of its silhouette. That's all I could think of. I couldn't think of anything else.
I mean, go ahead.
Trees.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I used to think our slogan was City of Trees because you know, like trees was in everything. And then also just, I mean, the creek, right? Like a ribbon.
Yeah, the.
Ribbon of a river or
The,
something. Yeah.
if you look at, you know, what borders our city, and I'm looking over at the wall, sorry, David, you can't, you know, we have Black Creek and Deer Creek that all come to a confluence on one corner of our city, and so it's now, and we've been able to now actually reclaim it and be able to actually enjoy it. It used to be hidden and, you know, channelized and flooded a lot, but now it's actually an amenity for most and a flood mitigation project. But if you look at the number of parks we have, the green space in parks, and you actually look at an area, Google image area of all the other surrounding municipalities, we do stand out because there's so much green space and, you know, areas to enjoy trees and nature. I'd also look at, again, the other side of that. We're at the confluence of not just natural resources, but we're at the confluence of I-70 and 40 and really close to 44. So all of the major
All roads lead to Brentwood.
roads, everything leads, so we're sort of at the confluence, right? I mean, I know St. Louis.
Confluence in two different
St. Louis
ways. Yeah,
City likes to say
transportation and
the
also
confluence
water.
of the big rivers, but, you
Yeah.
know, within the county, we're sort of the confluence of commerce and you know, nature and recreation and all of that. So I think there are some visual language aspects that could come out of that. And then I do think there are some, you know, maybe there's some landmarks, there's some certain things that feel unique, that we might be able to put a list together or take some pictures that might help.
Yeah, any reference material you have would be great. Do you think it's worthwhile to further explore the bee, you know, the illustrative bee, if we incorporated some different elements potentially and maybe played around with the scale and stroke weight and such?
I do. I just think that, you know, yeah, maybe the style wasn't something that people reacted to before.
Yeah, honestly, I like the three options. I like the font in option C because I really like that crossed W as a unique. It's just a very small thing, but when you mentioned it and when you said it was a reference back to the old design, I like all those things, and it does give it a bit of a. It's not off the shelf. It's more of a unique. You know, it makes the whole word Brentwood somewhat more unique just by doing that, by double crossing that W.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting. I mean, you've given three different versions here. Obviously, you know, all lowercase, title case, and then all uppercase. I don't know why. I always just feel like all uppercase for a city just feels right.
Yeah.
The title case feels like it's a headline, you know, a start of a headline or something. I don't know. I mean, it works in option B, but I think it's something to also consider when we look at the fonts. But I would reevaluate whether or not we need the state of Missouri outline. And if we don't use the state of Missouri, then I think the B outline or something else, a leaf or a leaf river thing, you know, as a symbol, could then hold the Mo or something like that, you know. But those are things that I think let your design team explore a little bit more.
Okay, great.
Thanks, everybody, for that feedback. I guess I'll turn it over to Bola for a moment.
So an item that the committee should consider as we move forward is budget. I think we have we pulled the financial statement, and there's a balance of about $19,000 left out of a $66,000 budget. And so I'm not certain, and we could take this conversation offline to figure out whether there's sufficient funds for a change order to do more exploration.
Well,
or,
would this be a change order? I mean, we haven't delivered a logo yet. I mean,
right, but they've had multiple meetings on this topic with staff and now with the committee, and the agreement calls for two.
okay. I think that would be something that you, allow you to take
Exactly.
offline. This is
So
not, that's
we'll-
not for the committee to.
Right, but if it does require funding, we'll bring it back.
Yeah, I mean, we want to get it right. We don't want to, we don't want to feel like we're accepting something that is not where the committee or even the city feels like they need to be. I would guess you would feel the same way. You would want it to be, it to be right. So I'll let you all take that offline and then report back to us, I guess, right?
Sounds good.
Okay. Any other parting thoughts on branding? Okay. Thank you so much
Very much.
for the presentation
Great
and the
discussion,
time.
thank you.
Yep.
Thanks very much, yeah.
Thank you.
So we have one more item of old business. It's item 2, which is a review of the banner policy for the allowing partnership, I guess, with the school districts or schools.
Schools. Thank you for your input, for taking time to take another look at that policy, because it was on the Board of Aldermen agenda for yesterday. And, you know, having a pause and taking another look at it gave us an opportunity to refine it a little bit more. So I believe it's in board docs. So you've made some changes. We ran it past the city attorney. He agreed with all the changes you made. And then just for consistency, we took some of the language that you used to describe other institutions and just populated that throughout the document instead of just referencing Brentwood School District, since this is a more broad policy that would apply to accredited schools. I think that was the phrase you used, accredited schools within the city. So what you have before you is a red line version and a clean version. Once again, we thought this needed to be done right, which is why we asked that it be taken off, the chair asked that it be taken off the agenda last night. Thoughts about what it looks like now?
And I don't know if in the red line version, it does it, because some of them, it doesn't seem like applied changes, so some of it's just highlighted. So the highlighted where my comment was, where like Brentwood School District, would that be applied, or are we keeping Brentwood School District to that? And just for background for the committee's sake, this was initiated by the Brentwood School District wanting to be able to put banners up that were a partnership with the city that had shared recognition of some of our achievements together. They would, that's why we didn't have a policy. So this is a policy discussion, which is what this committee is really tasked with, mostly is communication policies. The way that it was previously written felt like it was isolating Brentwood School District, and when I think our policy needs to be more broadly the accredited institutions of our city that would include things like St. Mary Magdalene. Now, the question then becomes, do we allow anybody who calls themselves a school or learning facility? And that's why we put, I suggested the accredited educational institutions. That way it keeps it on the level of like St. Mary Magdalene and Brentwood School District schools. So it was just kind of making the policy not feel so heavily weighted with the school district, and especially taking out some of the decision maker ability from the school district as it related to the policy. So that was some of the changes. Yep, put your mic on.
My experience with those goes all the way back when I was president of the Soulard Restoration Group in Soulard, and the issue there was not getting them up, but getting them down. Because they would stay up so long, they began looking bad, and nobody would ever take them down. And
Yeah, we have 90 days, I think, is.
oh, that's great,
a
yeah.
limit.
Because I was just gonna recommend that the policy not only has to do with who can put them up, but how long they can be up before they take them down, because they begin to look bad really fast.
And we will be responsible, the city will be responsible for hanging and bringing them down.
I got you.
So I don't, do you, I mean, obviously you've got my comments. I don't know if anybody else on the committee feels there's any additional comments to be made before this goes back to, and do you need a new motion to adopt this and take it to the board?
I'll make a motion that we adopt this banner policy and move it to the board for full approval.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Do we need a roll call or voice vote?
Voice vote's fine.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it. All right, so that moves back up to Board of Aldermen at the next meeting, right? Okay, great. So there's no new business, and it just opens up for citizen comments. If there's anybody listening online? No? All right. Seeing no further business, this meeting